Hi, everybody. I want to welcome you to a retro episode of World's Finest True Believers. When we moved the show to the Geek Ultimate Alliance network, we could not easily drop all the previous shows into the feed. So what we decided to do was to drop them every other week so new listeners can get a chance to hear them, and our veteran listeners of the show can revisit some of these golden oldies. If you like the show, please give us a review and rate us on Apple Podcast or whatever your podcatcher choice may be. I hope you enjoy this retro episode, and I'll see you all next week with a brand new episode of World's Finest True Believers. Hello, and welcome to World's Finest True Believers. Each episode, a guest and I will discuss one of our favorite comic book arcs or graphic novels from any publisher. My name is Chris. Thanks for joining us. Now let's get started. So we're bringing back our first returning guest, but this one was a planned one. I want to welcome back Jordan Funk to the podcast.
What's going on, man? Thanks for having me back. It's great to be back. Feels like not all that long ago, you and I were discussing a lovely arc that we will be finishing today, and I am excited to chat with you about it, my good man.
Yes, definitely. We left it on a good cliffhanger, but like all cliffhangers, we will hopefully deliver with the conclusion of it.
Hopefully. That's the plan. That's the plan. We'll see if we execute it well enough. Unlike that editor that we were just talking about.
And if we don't stick the landing, we'll hear about it and we'll just lose listeners, but we'll continue on.
Yes, we will. We will march on.
Good. So if for some reason, if this is the first time hearing the podcast, Jordan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure thing. I'm not going to go into the depth that I went into last time, but my name's Jordan Funk. I live here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, originally from New York, and I currently host a podcast with my good buddy Chris Rimmer called DC Comics Squadcast on the Suicide Squadcast network. And aside from that, just do my normal day job and come home. And if I'm not watching sports, I'm reading comics. And if I'm not doing either of those two, I'm listening to music or making music. Or spending time with my lovely fiance and bearded dragon. But aside from that, not really a whole lot else.
All right. Well, again, welcome back, and glad we get to bring this arc to a conclusion. So without further ado, the arc that we started with episode number 1 was the Court of Owls. So now we are heading into, we originally thought this was going to be a 3-part kind of series, but once we delved into Night of Owls and the City of Owls, which is what we're looking at tonight, that there was the combination of the graphic novels. There wasn't too much left in City of Owls that wasn't already talked about in Night of Owls. So we decided to make this just a 2-parter. So we will be looking at Night of the Owls and the City of the Owls, bringing the Court of Owls saga to a conclusion.
Yes, and man, what a conclusion it is. We will delve into that more here in a little bit, but again, I can't praise enough this entire run. And I mean, I guess we'll be talking about it here in a little bit, but the Night of Owls, man, we were just talking about before we started recording, super great job of everybody on the New 52 books at the time, the Batman, Bat Family books in particular, to sort of tie everything into one another, going off of this, loose storyline, and for everybody to contribute what they did and how they did it. Each were unique in their own right, but they were also awesome. I don't think that there was a story that I read that I didn't like here to add to the lore of the Court of Owls in, finishing this saga. But you actually had brought it up to me, my man. When I was picking this up, because I obviously bought this after the trade had come out, I picked up volume 1 for Court of Owls. And for those of you that don't know, pick up Night of the Owls as well. But we might not want to do what edition do you have, my good man? You have the collector's edition, right?
It's just the collected hardbound edition, nothing necessarily a collector's edition.
Gotcha.
But yeah, there's a big warning we will give with that. That if you're a first time, and obviously we're spoiling a lot of it, but if you want to read it on your own, we'll point out something that you're going to want to possibly avoid at that point.
Absolutely, yeah. But it's again, testament and well done to Scott Snyder and his team and everybody else for their contributions to the story as well. Just made for it just jam packed. Man, you could have it's its own little world essentially, and it's one of those things where I have to get into and start reading the New 52 Talon run. I heard that was also pretty awesome. So that's one of those things that just makes me want to go to my shop and see if they have it there. And if not, then order it offline. So that will be my next on my buy list for sure.
I've heard good things about it. I have not read it also either at that point, but like you said, heard good things. So let me read a brief synopsis, kind of combining both Night and City of the Owls together.
Go for it.
For over a century, the Court of Owls has ruled Gotham City in secret. Their reach inescapable, their power unstoppable, until they battle the Batman. As evil spreads across Gotham City, Batman's allies, including Red Robin, Batwing, Robin, Batgirl, the Birds of Prey, Nightwing, and even Catwoman, find themselves in a battle coming from all sides. The Court of Owls have shown their hand, and it's up to the collective efforts of these heroes, some more unlikely than others, in this sprawling tale of corruption and violence. As Batman and his allies battle against the Talons to save Gotham City, a dark secret is revealed that will shake Batman and Bruce Wayne to question significant events from his past.
I think that does a pretty good job of summing it up, man. It's definitely hits the nail on the head, and something that, doesn't give away a whole lot while it's explaining it. Some synopses are just like synopses, I guess, at that point, which are just, it give the whole thing away, and you're like, come on, man, what's going on? But no,
Yeah.
This one's definitely a great description as to what's to follow here in Night and City of the Owls.
Yeah, just like, unfortunately, some movie trailers, like giving away the entire movie. Oh, saves me the $9 then.
Yeah, there you go. That's a great point. I never thought about that. But yeah, or solicitations. Solicitations are that way too sometimes, where they just give away what's going on. Like if you're not caught up on Year of the Villain yet, there's one of those, I think it's what book is it? Year of the Villain, #1. In the back, they have all the solicitations as to what's going to be coming out. Don't read it. It spoils a lot as to what's going to be going in there. Just FYI for you.
Yeah, good to know. So usually we do talk about the contributors to this, the creators, writers, artists, and inkers. Night of Owls takes place in a number of different books, as kind of what was alluded to in the synopsis, which Scott Snyder coordinated all of this with all involved writers and artists so that they could also tell their own story. Since this part of the saga takes place over 8 books, that is a lot of writers and artists to give the background. So for this episode, we're going to forego going into each of these contributors, but I also don't want to lessen their contributions and not give them their credit. So I'm going to take a few minutes and kind of list out the issues and the creative team behind them.
Go for it.
First, start off with All-Star Western, Jimmy Palmiotti and Justin Gray as writers. We're attached with artists, and let me say up front, I apologize for also possibly getting some of these names pronunciations wrong. Batwing, writer Judd Winnick, artist Marcus Toe, Batgirl Gail Simone as writer, Arden Syaf as artist, Batman and Robin, Peter Tomasi as writer, Lee Garbat as penciler, and Andy Clark as art for the Talon backup story. Nightwing, Kyle Higgins as writer, Eddie Barros as pencils, Red Hood and the Outlaws, Scout Lobdell, writer, Kenneth Rocco artist, Detective Comics written and pencils by Tony S. Daniel, Birds of Prey, Duan Silzwensky as writer, Travel Foreman as penciler, Batman the Dark Knight, writer Judd Winnick and David Finch as penciler, and the Batman Annual, Scott Snyder and James Tynion IV as writers, and James Fabach as artist, and finally Catwoman, writer Judd Winnick and artist Gilliam March.
Holy
That
smoke.
is a lot of a team to make sure this is a well-weaved story.
And it is. And that's the most impressive part about this entire thing, is once you go through it, you're like, holy smokes. Everybody stayed within a certain guideline. However, they all also contributed their own things to this story and to this saga. And that, to me, is the most impressive thing about this. And you're just like sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, can you imagine having to plan that entire thing out, and you're sitting around this table of writers, and by the way, and creative teams, and like, can you imagine and I'm sure that they probably weren't all in a room. It might have all been done through emails and stuff, but like just sitting at a round table with all these folks, that'd be incredible, man. Holy smokes.
Well, it's interesting, and of course, we can't forget when we get to the main Batman arc, the same creative team is there: Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo, Jonathan Glapion.
Right.
But you're right, just having the team coming together, and it kind of I'll get into this a little bit in looking at the background behind the creation of the Night of the Owls arc and how this kind of idea came to fruition with Scott Snyder. But yeah, I mean, taking stories and storylines that are currently going on within the continuity but have nothing to do with it and finding a way to bring them in so it doesn't seem like a throwaway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just incredible, man. I don't even know that I have a whole lot to say about it other than, and the thing I think that's most interesting to me, or one of the most interesting aspects of it too, was just how similar, and not just the story is, but even the similarities in the art. Like, they're each different in their own way, but there's still a lot that looks quite similar just in their own, with their own little spin on it. And I love that aspect of it, in so much like in how it's framed, or how people will talk about in movies, how like each shot is sort of where it is, the angles and all that stuff. A lot of that's quite similar in these issues as they are to the main Batline book, and that's the most impressive thing, man. It just is 2 thumbs up and as many claps as I can give to them, to everybody involved.
And cheers all around.
Yeah,
cheers
for
all
real,
around.
for real. It's well deserved.
No, definitely. And so looking at and digging up some research on Night of Owls and the City of Owls, that's one of the things I was thinking about, like, how do you get a team together? And so in looking at the research, Scott Snyder talked to Newsarama and said, the way of the Night of Owls event came about was that he had this Court of Owls story to go from, even when he was on Detective, and he wrote an outline and started writing it as a couple of issues. And then he realized there was a point in the story where the court makes a play for Gotham,
Right.
which is where we ended the Court of Owls. And when you've got them making a play for the city like that, the Batman would need help, and from his Bat family. So they would naturally come to help Bruce. So he talked to the writers on the Bat titles, and he said, I don't want to force anything on you. The last thing I want to do is to have you do some crossover when you guys are in the middle of your stories. And he says that's why Batwoman was not a part of this.
Oh, gotcha. That makes sense.
He talked to the writing team, and he had several stories going on, and they were building a universe, and in a way that it just didn't work out. And so it became about giving the writers plenty of lead time and asking who wants to be a part of it. And if you want to create a story, here's the material for it. And you have plenty of room. We won't be tyrants about what you have to do and when. Batman won't touch your books because he's preoccupied, and you can use it or not. So that says a lot about Scott Snyder and the company of DC not saying, you're going to do what we're telling you to do right now.
No, it definitely was a collaborative effort, and it's interesting that was the case. It just interests me in how much DC is willing, how much leeway they're willing to give some creators versus other creators. It's just one of those things where, I mean, certain creators have earned it more so than others, in my opinion. It's also just, it speaks volumes to their collaborative process. Because, I mean, we've all heard stories about certain creators, and I'm not talking about anybody specific here, but just that are not necessarily the best collaborators. And then you get something like this where they're just, hey, look, and it makes sense because Batman would have the Bat family coming in to help him in all this. But, to get in touch with everybody that's on those books and just say, hey, look, this is what's going on in the main Bat title. In order to have our line, our stories be cohesive, I need some assistance from the Bat family, and in that, here's a rough outline. I hope you guys help, are willing to create an arc for this or a nice story for it. But if you're not, I get it, whatever. So keep doing your thing. But yeah, like you said, it speaks volumes to that creative team to be able to reach out to those guys like that and just say, hey, whatever you can contribute is going to be welcomed.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. And so it's something that we will say over and over. Definitely don't sleep on reading that Night of Owls arc. You can either buy it or you can. The storyline is actually on DC Universe for those of you that subscribe. So you can definitely add into it. One other thing I found out was the little backstories that are kind of sprinkled throughout Night of Owls and the City of Owls. Snyder had spoken to IGN about how and why he wanted to have those backup stories. And he said, well, when DC allowed him to do it, he contacted his very good friend, his co-creator of American Vampire, Rafael Albuquerque, I believe, and wanted him to saying, hey, you're coming up on a break, because apparently he goes on breaks after they finish up arcs, and said, hey, there's an opportunity to do this, and it happens to fall during your schedule. Do you think you can do the art for it? And he was all gung-ho about it. And then at the time, he said, I get to also co-write with a rising star. And at that point, he was just starting out, and it was James Tynion the fourth.
Yeah.
And he went into his whole thing about how he met him in teaching at Sarah Lawrence College. He was teaching fiction, and went into that whole background, which we've gone into other shows or upcoming shows about. Kept up with him afterwards and gave him that opportunity. So when it came down to the idea of doing the backups, it really wasn't something DC gave him the opportunity to say, well, you don't have to do this. We can kind of farm this out to some of other creative teams. But he felt so passionate about the project, he didn't want to relinquish any creative hand on it without his expressed kind of feelings about it. So it'll really show the scope. It really does show the scope of the attacks and the backups, and how the call out happened, and then later on some of the other background of the core.
Oh, definitely. And you could tell he's got pretty much complete creative control over this entire project. I know that might sound the complete opposite of what we said earlier, where you could, with the other writers and stuff, where he gave them a leash, but you can have creative control and give others some leeway to what they collaborate with you. But yeah, that's one of those things that you could definitely tell. And heck, if Tynion's just starting out then and he's already where he's at now, it's like that happens quick, It's like, holy smokes. Because then I believe after this is when they did Batman Eternal, correct?
Yes, that's very shortly after that.
Right,
yeah.
And then he did something, was it with Raphael Albuquerque, or was it, I think it might have been Jock, and I might be thinking of something completely different. But not Zack Snyder, Scott Snyder does that all the time with his buddies. If he gets them in on a project that he wants to do, he gets them in with them, but he always promises to help them contribute to something that they want to do as well. So it's a nice trade-off. And it's, again, one of those things where, he's a good collaborator, and you just want to sit down in a room and just collaborate with a man and come up with a story of your own and just see what that process is like. To be a fly on the wall for some of those meetings, man, would just be absolutely incredible. But I mean, I think the story is all better for him having said creative control on the project, and you could definitely feel its roots throughout each of the volumes for sure.
And especially, like you said, there's that balance that he's earned at that point to have that creative control, but also how much he didn't go over there, how much lead time he gave the other creative teams. But probably again, storylines go months and months in advance that they got to know where they're going at that point. So it obviously had the story gestating for a while, but again, have a little bit of control, but also give a little control. I think he definitely struck a good balance. So is there any other background or history before we start diving into the conclusion of this saga?
I don't think so, my man. Let's get into it.
All right. So obviously, if you haven't read The Court of Owls, that's the must. Yeah, that's basically all you really need to read beforehand. But yeah, so take it away, Jordan. Tell us where you want us to start.
Hey, everyone. Before we go to the next topic, we are going to head into some ads that help the Geek Ultimate Alliance keep the lights on. We don't get to choose what ads come on, and they sometimes can be a bit loud. So I want to give you a 3 count in order to give you the opportunity to turn your volume down before they come on. 3, 2, 1. We'll be back in a little bit.
Well, let's pick up right at the end of Court of Owls, where the Court of Owls make a play for the city of Gotham. That's one of the things I think that's most awesome. And this tends to happen in other books. You get a couple of, a villain who's maybe got a team, and they say, all right, we're going to make a play, and we're going to go here, and we're going to do this. And it's usually, I guess, focused and centered around one central location. So it could be a block, could be, a couple buildings. But this one, when they're like, once they set everybody out, and you hear, okay, and as, we sort of get into it in the story that the court has put a hit out on the 40 most powerful and influential figures in Gotham. You're like, 40? Oh my gosh, there's only so many Bat family members that they can't save everybody. And that's one of the things that this story goes into is no, they can't save everybody. And it's got real stakes. And it's one of those things where as soon as that's unleashed and you see the court do it and you see all the Talons jumping off this build, dude, that was incredible. You're like, okay, here we go, man. It's on. And it just picks up right where you leave off. I mean, how much should we delve into some of these other issues, or do you want to mainly just stay to the Batman stuff? Because
No, I think what we should delve into the issues, especially because of how, like, we've talked before we recorded, some of our favorite parts of this were the same in the sense of the backgrounds of each of these talents.
absolutely, and I think so. Just to give you guys again that reference as to what books are what and who's assisting where, I'm going to pull up this nice little picture that you had sent me, which gives me the rundown. I mean, we got Red Hood and the Outlaws, we got Batwing, Batman and Robin, which is mainly Damian centric. We got Batgirl, Nightwing, and Catwoman, Birds of Prey. So I guess where I'll start with some of those is basically all of these different Talons are set out to take out all of these different powerful figures. And so they're given a list, and they're basically like, hey, based off of where you guys are, and this is Alfred reaching out to the Bat family, based off of where you are, find the name and the people that are closest on your list that you can get to and get to them ASAP. And then they have to go and take care of these figures. And I think let's also start with Bruce there too, because that's how this all winds up happening is, once these guys are released, and when I mean guys, these Talons are released, we pick up with Bruce at his home after the events of the Court of Owls, and he's kind of not necessarily a shell of himself at this point, but he's definitely a little bit more hardened. If you guys remember what happened at the end of the last one, he was driven almost insane by the court. He was down in their maze for how long? Was it a week? Was it 10 days? Something along those lines.
Yeah.
And while he's down there, drives him a little bonkers. And so he's been standing in this room with no lights on, sort of looking over the city. And he's just like, I guess the best part would be, and I'm just going to read a little thing of dialogue here, if you don't mind. He goes, I've always believed the best way to know the city is to stay close to the ground, to feel the cracks in your sidewalk under your shoes, the strange, bright silence of the park under snow, the hissing rain of the sparks that comes down when the elevated train passes overhead on 3rd Avenue, the late night ticking of traffic lights. It's only been in the last few weeks that I've come to understand how wrong I've been, because I now know that you can spend your whole life learning Gotham from deep inside and still know nothing about it at all. And I love that line of dialogue, because I think that is exactly what you and I talked about when we were talking about Court of Owls last time, is Batman is so hard-headed and stubborn that he knows Gotham City better than anybody, and it proves that he is just flat out wrong here. And so things pick up there, and as he's in this darkened room where he's not exposed himself much to light or anything like that because of, again, him spending time down in the maze, on top of everything else, he's sort of just trying to recover, get his body back to usual, back to normal. And one of the things that happens is him and Alfred start to hear a few noises around the house, and they're like, wait a second, what's going on? Then they hear a thump, and then they're like, oh my gosh, we have an intruder. Let's see what's going on. Alfred's getting ready to run down to the cave, and Bruce is in basically his skivvies and a robe at this point. And he's running around his house trying to figure out, okay, what's going on? And then, boom, you get this whole bunch of Talons that are coming for Bruce and Alfred. And he fights them in his home, and he tries to take the fight elsewhere. They have him sort of surrounded. But while they have him surrounded, Alfred runs down to the cave. He's trying to keep up with Bruce and where he is. And, dude, there's this one panel where you see Alfred, and he all of a sudden turns around, and you have this Talon walking down the stairs, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, this is getting real. This is getting real now. And it's a full-blown invasion on Batman in the Batcave. And it's insane.
Well, it's even it's just interesting that the Talons in the court didn't have any idea who Bruce was. And because they make that statement, it's like, well, Bruce Wayne, you've got a secret too.
Oh.
It was just like, okay, well, you don't know everything, I guess. I guess he did do a good job keeping the secret, but it was kind of surprising that they didn't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then it's amazing how quick that spreads, at least from the Talons' perspective, to where they're like, Oh, okay. And the one thing that I do like about this too, though, is that they don't just send one Talon for Batman.
Mm-hmm.
They realize that they got a lot to deal with on their plate here, and they send basically a small army. And with this, it really pushes Bruce to his limits and his breaking point. And one of the things I thought was awesome is when he takes the fight out onto the roof. And he does. And he takes it out there and he grabs the weather vane off the top and he starts slashing at the Talons. And he then realizes while he's on there, he spent too much time on one Talon in particular to have him surrounded. Dude, he's got a button on the chimney of his house that like slides him all the way down to the Batcave, which I was like, this is awesome. Again, one of the great things here too is he comes face to face with the Talon who's standing right there. And he's just like, well. And this is exactly where it comes in. Well, you have a secret, don't you, Bruce? And as the Talon says this, you just hear this creak and you look at the penny because he's standing right next to it. And Alfred pushes the penny over and crushes this Talon. And I was like, that's epic. That's awesome. But one of the crazy things about it, too, they go over with the penny and Batman was just like, how many are coming for us? And you're like, this guy can't answer him. He's crushed. Nope. Turns out his head's sticking out of there. And he's just like, enough. Not just for you, though. Don't worry. You'll find that out pretty soon. Yeah, it just gets brutal. Batman cracks his wrist. And again, we have this full-blown invasion of these Talons. They're like soaring into the Batcave, which is awesome because you have all the bats that are surrounding them too. And they realize, okay, yeah, we are completely SOL at this point. We have to send, this is too much for just myself to handle. So we have to send a signal out to the rest of the Bat family to see where things are going. And all the while this is happening, there is a Talon who goes and finds, if you guys remember from the last issue, the main Talon that was sent, that Bruce winds up fighting and bringing his body with him, is in the Batcave.
Yeah, Dick's
great-grandfather, William Cobb, I believe. And we will get there at some point, too. And you realize that this Talon's going up to William Cobb, and you don't really get the finisher of that. You don't really see where that heads. You do to an extent. You'll find out here in a little bit. But it's one of those things where it shows you that one little panel, and then it's just like, okay, well, that's going on. Here's the rest of all this crazy chaos. And so from there, all of these, you see these different figures, and you see them all just get obliterated, man. It's just insane. And I don't know how else to describe it. And basically what happens is all of these names get released. Let me see. And they start talking. So let's see who some of these folks are who don't quite make it. We have Kane County Supreme Court Justice Jan Spitz. We got Bill Keep, Valerie Venderman, John Lee, Miguel Guadalupe, and they all do their best to try and fend off what's coming at them. And yeah, it's not great. It's not a great result for them. And I think the thing that's the biggest wow factor for me is just the facial expression of Alfred, and Bruce at this point, where they're like, okay, we need to take these things into considerable measures. And the biggest thing that we can do is one of the things Bruce tells Alfred to do. He goes, go and lock yourself in the armory, lock yourself in there, and you're not allowed to come out until I say it's all good to come out. And he's like, well, Bruce, you're not allowed to stay in there either. You're still trying to recover from everything. And he's just like, don't worry, I got a plan. And then you see Court of Owls banging on the door of this armory, and they're trying to get in there. And they see where Bruce runs into. And then, dude, there's just this awesome splash page of Bruce opening the door saying, get the hell out of my house. And he's in this gigantic bat suit, and he's going to take on the court. And, dude, it is just epic. Like, from here, you go and you go and you go. With that, me starting that off, man, where do you want to take it from there? Because I want to get your opinion on some of this stuff, too. What are you thinking while all this is going down?
Well, my first question, is that the Hellbat costume or that the Hellbat armor?
It does look very similar to the Hellbat armor, but I don't think it quite is. I think this is definitely a little bit of a bulkier, more of just a menacing mech suit in a way.
Okay, yeah, because I didn't think it was, but it looked too similar to say, okay, maybe it's a new design of it.
Right.
tell me where you want it. I mean, again, pick and choose, because we can we can spend weeks and days on all of this.
Definitely. Well, from there, what were some of your? Let's dig out to the Bat family a little bit. What was the one story that you read right off the bat that was just kind of like, oh, this is what they're doing with this. This is awesome. Like, which story kind of caught you off guard in a good way?
I'd say the two that I enjoyed the most. I enjoyed the whole thing, but I'd say Nightwings and Red Hood and the Outlaws.
Yes.
At that point, once you got to the actual Red Hood and the Outlaws, when they were going after Victor Freeze and trying to protect him, but Nightwing and Red Hood and the Outlaws.
I would agree with you there, man. Those are definitely in the top for me as well, and I would add on Damian to that. And the only reason for Damian's is just, and it's nothing in particular, even for characters in particular, but it's just like, it just goes to show you how friggin' awesome Damian is as this 11, 12-year-old. He just is so much further along, so much farther along at this point in his stage as Robin than anybody else is, and it's very apparent. And nobody takes him seriously until he's just like, oh, hey, because he's going to save this commander. I can't remember the commander's name off the top of my head, but he goes and he's basically like, hey, you need to come with me. And they're like, huh, you know what it reminds me of? Did you ever see Titans? Where it's,
yes.
Where's Batman? Where's Batman? They're all like looking for Batman. And Damian's just like, no, Batman's not here. He's off fighting a bunch of these assassins that are actually coming to kill you at the moment. And I know you have these super talented soldiers here, but yeah, they're not going to stand a chance against the type of assassins that are coming for your head, my good man. So let's get the hell out of here. And the guy's just like, no, I will stand. I will fight. I'm a member of the armed services. I don't leave a man behind. And then you see the Talons coming up the stairs and just tearing into the teams. Mm-hmm. And then he goes, okay, yeah, so where are we flying to? And him and Damian picks him up and he's trying to like fly him sort of out of harm's way. And while he does, this Talon's crazy and jumps on and winds up taking them down. So they have this crash landing and it's just insane. But Damian takes care of business, gets the job done. And it was one of those things where you're like, hell yeah, Damian, go get it, man. You're awesome. So I love that story of it. It was great.
I like when you said, like, why did we listen to this kid? I reading straight from it, says, because this kid read Clausewitz and Gemini at the age of 6 while you were still trying to figure out the buttons on Q-Box you can sell. And you all follow my orders, the Talon won't be staying in a fixed position for long. And I was like, yep, I'm sold.
That's Damian for you. It's great because he's still a smartass and he's like, all right, yeah, you want to live? Follow me. You don't? Good luck. I'm getting the hell out of here. I know when to play and I know when to not. I know when I'm outnumbered.
Or Damian just shooting the grapple hook through his eye, and then at the ending saying that, the Talon's trying to say as he's hanging there, saying, I'll complete my task, the bros will die. And Damian goes, you know something? I believe you, and cuts off his head.
Dude, it's brutal, but it's awesome. And I like that they were not afraid to go there with the characters who cross that line. Red Hood and the Outlaws is another one. Let's talk about that, man. It's insane in that, first of all, I like how this is really, I think, the first time, and I have not read the New 52, Red Hood and the Outlaws, but I believe this is one of the first times Jason Todd has sort of been back to Gotham, or that he's really going to be lending a hand to the Bat family. And he even questions it. He's like, man, I get a freaking call from Alfred, and I hop on it like crazy. What's the deal there? I distrust Bruce and all that stuff, but Alfred gives me a call. I'm there.
Yeah, he's very, very clear when they said, you're doing this for Batman. He says, I'm not doing this for Batman. I'm doing this to protect a city.
That's exactly what he does. And he's even talks about that example. He jumps off the building. And when he does, Roy and Starfire's like, should we follow him? And Roy's like, let's give him a minute before they jump down to join him. And he's just like, as he's flying down as he's jumped off this roof and he's just kind of cruising through the air, he's just like, he talks about her and then it talks about his city. And I was like, that's what this whole Bat lore is about, man. It's like, I think that's one of the great things about Scott Snyder. I heard him in an interview somewhere one time talking, and he goes, I think people forget sometimes that like Gotham is not just a place where all these events take place. Gotham is another character in the story. It's not just a place. It is a character in and of itself. And that's why it's the thing that Batman strives his best to protect no matter the circumstances. And it's one thing that he has passed down to his Bat family. And it becomes very apparent because they all answer the call. It's one of those things where they're just like, hey, let's do it. And we have to do it for the greater good. And they do. But going back to Red Hood, I love how, and this is pun somewhat intended, but how cold Mr. Freeze is when he's going to get attacked by this Talon, and in getting attacked by this Talon, he's putting up a fight against him, and the Talons are like, you betrayed the Court of Owls, because if you remember, they use Freeze's cryo technology in order to freeze their Talons, to keep them in this sort of stasis, and he's like, I didn't do it if I knew what you guys were going to do, I would have never worked with you in the first place, but it's too late for that now, and now you got to pay the price. And when Jason tries to help him out, he wants no part of it whatsoever. And then same thing when Roy and Starfire have to come in and subdue Mr. Freeze. And that's the thing, is keep him safe, but also kind of don't let him get crazy out of control. And while they're trying to keep him safe, he doesn't want any part of it. So they're like, okay, well, we have to incapacitate him somehow. So they do. Roy shoots this. It's like a plunger arrow in a way, where it sticks onto his helmet, which is awesome. Yeah. And then it shocks him and knocks him out. And I was like, that's awesome. And that's one of the things that Jason talks about as well with Roy. And he talks about he's like, I forget, he's such a smartass sometimes that I forget about how genius of a weapon builder he is, because his hand winds up getting frozen from Mr. Freeze when he's in the lab, obviously trying to assist Mr. Freeze while also taking out this Talon. And it's just incredible what he's able to do with one hand first, because he jumps out the window after this Talon with the frozen hand, and he's trying to fight him, realizes that, and that's one thing that the Bat family does, is they're all like, yeah, we'll take on these assassins. They can't be too crazy. And every single one of them in every book talks about, oh, snap, I underestimated how quick their regenerative abilities are, as well as how skilled of fighters they are. And I just incapacitated them this way. If anything, it should take them at least 10 minutes to get back to where they are. Nope, man, 5 seconds later, they are up and they are back fighting. Sometimes they get right back up, crack the bone into place, and just go, bring it on. And then they do. And they go to war, and it's insane. But heading back to the whole Roy thing, he winds up shooting in this arrow that sort of melts the ice around Jason's hand, and Jason's able to then follow this Talon, which then leads him to this other location, and Roy and Starfire are left to incapacitate Mr. Freeze. They do, but after Jason follows this owl, this Talon, he realizes that they are taken to this old circus tent, or this old location, where the circus tent was set up, that he realizes is a connection to Dick as well at that point. And he starts to talk to the Talon, and he's like, he even states, I can't believe I'm reasoning with a Talon right now. Like, what the hell is going on? And so he does, though, and they actually, instead of fighting to the death, it's one of those things where they both realize they have a lot more in common than they think they do, and they talk about death and how they both have come back from death, and that they want to end their stories on their own terms. And that's how that issue, or that part with the Talon ends, is he just asks Jason for mercy at that point and basically says, kill me. And it's, oh man, it was brutal. I was reading that and I was like, that's so freaking sad. But by the same token, that's one of those things where you think about Batman as a character and you think about Jason as a character. And Batman, I don't think, pulls that trigger. I think he's just like, look, I know you want to do this, but we can rehabilitate you. You could be better. Whereas Jason goes, some people can't. And I know this, and I'm going to do him the favor. And you don't see anything, but it's one of those things that's more implied than it is saw at that point. And then what happens is after Mr. Freeze has been incapacitated, brings him to the rooftop to give to Barbara. When he does, he calls her legs. He's like, hey, nice legs. And she's just kind of like, you're thinking that you're like, oh man, what's going on? And she's just kind of like, you imbecile. I can't believe you have the gall to even show up here after everything and after all the terrible acts you've done. And she's like, wait a second, is that Mr. Freeze? And he's just like, yep, well, anywho, I got other things to do, And she goes, well, the next time I catch you in the city, I'm going to make sure you share a cell that's next to Mr. Freeze. And he's just like, yeah, good luck with that. I kind of got other stuff going on that I'm going to worry about. Oh, and by the way, when all is said and done, tell Bruce I said you're welcome. And then like jumps away and you're like, this is awesome. So man, that was definitely one of my favorites for that. And it just is heart-wrenching, man. It was. You read it and you're just like, oh gosh, crazy.
And I think that's what I really like across all the books is that we get the Talons have a story. There's a reason behind who they are. They're not just lifeless assassins. And I like that almost every one of these issues in the Night of the Owls is that, it takes place in one night, but we get so much information on all these Talons that even if they die in the end, in an issue, we get to know who they were.
Absolutely. It humanizes them. It gives you, I don't know what the best way to describe it is. It just gives you insight that these were people too, and that they didn't necessarily make all these choices. And, even some of the choices that they did make, they were sort of forced into them in a way. And with that, it's just they all have very tragic, very sad stories. And it's just one of those things where you feel for them, man. It's like, in a way, you feel for Zod when you watch Man of Steel, It's like you feel for these people, and in that, it just makes the choices that the protagonists have to make that much harder, and it just drives the story. So it's one of those things, man, where I agree with you. I like that you get that human aspect. You get to know some of these Talons a little bit. So I definitely dug that aspect of it. But why don't you tell us about what happens with Dick, man?
Yeah, I mean, Nightwing, I think, like you said, it's a very sad story. I mean, it's his kind of backstory of his great-grandfather, William Cobb. You kind of start off his first issue with, I think it was number 8, I believe, Nightwing number 8, and you kind of get led into this idea that this young boy juggling out in the streets, trying to make ends meet to help his family, and then taking a guy who robbed someone and take him out with a baseball, and the guy notices him, saying, "How about a change of venue?" And so you kind of get the idea of who this Talon is taking out some of these city officials. This is who it is. And so looking at the idea of who William Cobb is, joining the circus, getting a huge star within his own right, getting bigger and bigger, and his fight with Dick. Cobb views Dick as betraying who he was supposed to be, and that is why he needs to be taken out.
Yeah, it's so sad, man. You're like, what the hell? Why can't you guys just I don't know, join efforts? Just something along those lines. And have you ever seen the Batman versus Robin movie, the animated movie?
It's been a while, but
dude, the fights in that movie are so insane, and that's just that was one of those things that popped up here, is because that's the main Talon that is taking on Batman there. But it also, the thing I like about how tragic that story is, it also just goes to show you why, when all is said and done, and I guess this is subjective as to who might be the best suited, but why Dick he's the best suited to put on the cowl if Bruce is ever away. Mm-hmm. I think that story, in that short amount of time, those 2 issues tell you why. He's got heart. He knows how to fight. He does make mistakes, and he's just a young Bruce. You could tell he was raised by Bruce, and he makes the same mistakes that Bruce does. However, he's also, in his own way, he's just like, look, dude, I am giving you every opportunity to, you're kicking my ass a little bit, and I'm kicking yours, but there are ways around this. And they're just like, no, they're not. And he's just like, well, all right, then. You guys are going to make me do this. And dude, one of the things that was craziest about that is when he sticks his stick into the guy's head, and he's just, he's like, he's incapacitated for a little while. And he goes over to Mayor Haiti, and he's just like, okay, you guys, they're like, you killed him. And he's like, no, he's got regenerative abilities. I just stunned him for the time being, enough for us to sort of get away. And as he's saying that, you just see all these knives that, again, from the backstory, because this kid goes from juggling these baseballs and throwing these baseballs to juggling and throwing knives, and you see all these knives just go shunk, 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 and you're like, oh my gosh.
How is Dick still alive?
And that's one of those things, too, that's like a big phobia for me, man. It's just like stabbing or something like this. So you see all, think there's like 6 of them or something like that. It's crazy. Goes into his body. You're like, alrighty then. And it comes to a point where the Talon, or Dick, is basically like bleeding out. He like falls down the stairs of the subway, and you're like, oh, okay, things are not looking great for Dick here. You can assume that, might be the end of Dick Grayson, maybe. And you're like, I don't know if that could be the case. And it come to find out, Dick had actually led this Talon down to the tracks for a reason, because of I can't remember the name of the chemical component, but where the liquid nitrogen, where he takes the pipe and sprays it all over, which then slows down the Talon, and he takes him out that way. And it's awesome.
But like looking at like just even seeing how Cobb was just screwed over in his life, like he fell in love.
So sad.
The father was just like, no, you are not going to marry my daughter. You will not have any influence on this family.
What does he say? White is white, black is black, and there's a difference in, he's just like, the white are the most, I think he says it, the white are the most powerful, and he's just talking about the chess pieces at this point, I think, where he's making some sort of metaphor about the class opportunities back, in that day. And he's just like, you might have built yourself up from nothing, but you're still filth, and you'll never marry my daughter. And I'm going to make sure I'm going to take all measures to make sure that you don't marry my daughter.
And then you find out that she's pregnant and she's get forced into a different marriage. So when Cobb kind of gets to become a Talon, he does something about it, and he takes his son back, and he said, raise him with Haley in the secret and prepare him for the legacy. My son, the gray son of Gotham.
You're just like, oh man, it's so epic. It just is epic, man. It's the only way we could describe this. I'm getting so excited talking about all this stuff. It's just like one of those things, man, where you're just reading it and you just start like, my legs start going, man. I get the restless leg syndrome going. I'm like, I start sweating. And you're just like, oh, I guess that's why John Schnepp used to call us sweaties. But it's one of those things where it's just, yeah, man, it gets your blood racing and everything. It just gets the heartbeat going, and it just is, it's great. I don't think there's really any other words to describe it. But in order to sort of slowly, I guess, wrap everything into one, is basically, this is what all those books are. It's basically everybody gets a target that they have to then try and defend. And it becomes a lot more difficult than they think. And the Court of Owls, man, their Talons put up a fight. And it's one of those things where I want to see some more of them, man. I wish that they would come back into the Batman lore a little bit more. I understand why it was taking a break from it, because, like, honestly, how do you do it aside from, unless you're Batman who laughs and it's Scott Snyder and he just kills half of the Court of Owls while he's in there. But it's crazy.
Well, kind of an aside, Batman Annual #1, looking at a New 52 background on who Victor Fries is. What did you think? What did you think about that? That is quite I'd say a significant departure from. I didn't see that one coming.
I did not either, because we all know that the traditional story is him with Nora and him and his wife, and the fact that, like, dude, I don't even know how to describe it, man. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. It's sad. First of all, too, this art, man, is gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. I think it's some of my favorite art throughout the entire run, man. And I don't think that was done by Capullo. That was Jason Fabok. So,
yep. Absolutely
gorgeous, man. And no, it's terrifying. Victor Fries does not give a crap, and he's snapping necks left and right here when he breaks out, and I just didn't see it coming either, man. It's one of those things where you're like, okay, they did it. Everybody's got their own way of going about things, and just to find out what had happened was just heart-wrenching, man. I don't know a different way to describe it. What did you think when you read it? Were you like, oh, they went there?
Oh, I didn't see it coming. One, like, Bruce kind of shutting the project down, and then just the whole admission that you seem to forget, Victor, he says, basically, Nora is not your wife. Nora was born, Nora Fields, in 1943 and put in cryo sleep by her family because she had a heart condition. And Victor wrote a thesis before he became Mr. Freeze about solving her condition. And that basically it became an infatuation with him that he considered Nora his wife. And I was like, wow. That is a mind blown talk about falling in love with your patient.
And he even mentions to him, like, even if you were successful in bringing her back, she's not. She won't know who you are. Like, what do you think? What do you think's gonna happen? Come on, guy. Like, and so I'll spare you the pain, and you're like, yeah, well, that's not true. You can't spare him any pain at this point. He's just, that's all he is pain, and it just absolutely heart wrenching. And then to figure out what had happened with his mom. Oh my gosh! And so let me go back here and just make sure so I don't forget. His mom had a condition, correct, where she was wheelchair bound. Mm-hmm. And I think it in a different way, doesn't Victor, like, isn't it told in a different way before this, where he's like, it's originally told from his perspective, I think, and then he sees it completely different to what it actually is, and then after the revelation with Nora, then goes ahead and shows you what it is. So the first part is him and his mom walking in the snow. He's sort of running around. He's a little stumpy, cute kid, and she's like, Victor, there's no rush. The snow is not going anywhere. And he's like, but the competition started an hour ago. And she's like, and we have until sunset to build our own snowman, silly. And she starts talking about, she's just like, we make his face from this one apple, from our town tree, from his eyes to his wrinkles. There's a craft to it, Victor, an elegance that speaks of home. And he's just like, fine, but we're going to make him big just to be safe. And she's just like, okay. And he's like, so big that it'll last through spring before he melts. And he's just like, Mom. And he's walking over and you see that there's just this apple, but you don't see anything. And when he walks over where this apple is, there's a hole. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh no, his freaking mom fell into the ice. You're like, oh crap, what's going on? And then after the whole, Batman confrontation and things with Nora, you find out that Victor's story is a little different than what it actually was. And she's saying to him, how I love the snow, unbroken and white, before it's ruined by footprints. And he's pushing her in the wheelchair through the snow. And she's just like, we're off to the snowman contest again, aren't we, Victor? And he's just kind of like, yes, Mother. And she goes, but where's the apple? I forgot it. And he's like, it's okay, Mother. We can get one when we're there. And she's just like, oh, silly me. I get so confused ever since that accident. What was it, Victor? Oh, yeah, never mind. I found it. We have our apple tree right here. And she's like, I already carved it. You see it too, Victor? And you look at her hands, and her hands have she carved out 2 holes in her hands at this point. And it looks like Victor Freeze's goggles, what he bases his look off of. Mm-hmm, and exactly. He's just like, I see, Mother. And he gives her a kiss on her head, and he pushes her into the hole. And she drowns, man. It's so freaking depressing. It's just like, oh my gosh. And it's heart-wrenching, man. There's a lot of humanizing elements to this story, and it's sad, but I guess like we talked about at the beginning, man, there's stakes. There are real stakes here that happen, and they change what we know to be different things about the Batman lore, and just so clever. What a clever way to spin that.
It's definitely an interesting way, and you can either, some people probably like it, some people don't. I think it's a really interesting take and brings a new dynamic to Freeze at that point.
He's already, taken the steps that he has because of his Nora, and I just think of the animated series, the guy who does the voice. It's so good. Yes. And I have failed you. And then it's just, oh man, and I could just picture him as he's talking in this issue, and just picture that voice, and it's so damn depressing, but it's so good at the same time. But I love it, man. And maybe that says something about my personality. I don't know. It's just one of those things that was so well written, and you can choose to go either way you want with it, whether you want that to now be your version of how Mr. Freeze came to be, or if you could choose Heart of Ice. I don't think anybody's going to have any issue with either of those origins for sure. So.
Hey everyone, before we go to the next topic, we're going to head into some ads that help the Geek Ultimate Alliance keep the lights on. We don't get to choose what ads come on, and they sometimes can be a bit loud, so I want to give you a 3 count in order to give you the opportunity to turn your volume down before they come on. 3, 2, 1. We'll be back in a little bit.
True. So kind of like you said, we can go more with Night of Owls, but we want to kind of start kind of heading towards City of Owls and kind of focusing on Batman. But definitely, we just scratched the surface, listeners, with these stories. So definitely get a chance to read it. It'll give you a taste, and it's well worth your time. So do you want to head into the main Batman arcs?
Yeah, definitely. So after they basically get a handle on the Talons, Batman then sets his sight on, and I guess we should say how they sort of are able to take him down. And basically what they do is they realize that they take him down with this cooling factor. They turn down the temperature in the Batcave to, I think it's something crazy like minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And it basically puts them all into this stasis. And so Batman's like, even if just for now, I need to get out and I need to help the Bat family. I can't just stay here and fight all these guys. So let's just put them in stasis for now. And that's sort of what happens. And he winds up making his way out. And the first person that Batman goes to see is, and if you guys remember from last time, the person that Bruce Wayne was with trying to get him to help his Gotham initiative, and that is Lincoln March. He walks into his office and come to find out that Lincoln has been stabbed through the chest, but he was able to get a shot off and kill the perpetrator Talon that was in his office as well. It's really weird because like Batman opens the door and he's like, Mr. March, Batman's just like, you, Bruce Wayne, and Batman's just kind of like, huh? And then you hear thump, and it's just the Talon sitting there, and he's got obviously a knife in his hand. And he goes, for Bruce Wayne, I have a message for Bruce Wayne right before he sort of perishes. And Batman at this point is like, don't talk. We got an ambulance will be here at any moment. And he goes, no, please, here, take this. There are 3 names. I tried to follow the donations to figure it out. It's as close as I got. Could be all 3 of them are in the court. Could be none of them. And so he's just like, Batman's like, well, Mr. March, the more you talk. And he goes, I'm dead. He killed me. I got him back, though. Armor piercing. Friend on the force. But Bruce, you know him. Please tell him to fight them. Fix this city. It's worth it. It can be a good place. Remind him that a better Gotham is just one dream away. And he dies on the floor of his office. And that's when Alfred is just going, Master Bruce, the Talons have been contained. I have news on the other assassination attempts as well. And Batman's just like, I know where they all live, Alfred. And he goes, but sir, and he goes, they came to my house. Now I'm going to burn their house to the ground. And you're just like, oh, snap. And so next we get a full-on assault of the court. But were you anticipating that when he went to Lincoln's office? Like, when you first read that, he opens the door and you're like, whoa, that happened quick. Where did he done? I guess that's what happens when you don't have Bruce there to fight a Talon off the roof for you.
True, and the backstory of that, how that came to be is, I think it was Dark Knight number 9, and the Night of Owls goes into kind of that particular Talon, but he was marked at that point, Lincoln, for being taken out, but I was not expecting, like, oh, wait a minute, okay, I guess we're done with him for a bit.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, yeah, well, let's move on. I guess Lincoln March is no longer going to be part of the story. And then you move on, and he does just what he says he's going to do. And dude, I think that this is one of, if not my favorite page throughout the story, is you get Batman's narration. He's like, what you're looking at is the most expensive private residence in Gotham City, valued at $58 million, takes up the top 3 floors of the hotel. It's basically this apartment. And he talks about how it was built during the Depression as a fortress against the masses, basically. And this lady opens up this, is coming out of her elevator, and she's obviously part of the court. You can see the emblems on the outside of her elevator door. She's also wearing these owl eyes on her neck in a necklace. And dude, she opens her apartment, it's completely ransacked, and she's like, oh my gosh, security, I said security, help me. And then this is my favorite page where Batman locks her in. He's just like, you going down? And just like staring at her, man. And you're just like, oh, crazy. But then you look at her hands, dude. And when you look at her hands, they are creepy, man. The creepy nails are like all long and pointed. And you're just like, oh, man, this just goes so deep. I can't believe what's going on. She just goes, you can't be in here. I'm calling. And he's just like, Batman holds up this Court of Owls mask, and she's like, that's not Joseph. And it turns out to be Joseph Powers. And he's like, I know, Mrs. Powers, it's yours. I found the case for your husband's mask, but it's empty. Where is he? And she's just like, gone out of the country. And your friends, you might think you have the upper hand, but you don't. You never will. And she's like, if I were you, I'd leave the city and never come back. And Batman, because he locks her in the elevator where she's holding against these bars, and he goes, and if I were you, I'd get used to that view. And then he jumps out, and I was like, that's the way to do it. That's the Batman one-liners we're looking for there. And so he jumps out, and he is getting ready to try and find this secret location. And Alfred's just like trying to pinpoint it, and Batman's just like, I know exactly where it is. And if I remember correctly, this is where he went when he was a kid, right?
Yes, he mentions that this is exactly where he thought they were, and he even gives a little mention of Henry Ducard calling back to saying, when you get a gut feeling and it all suddenly clicks into place. And like you said, he goes back to the place where he thought the court was, but couldn't find him. Well,
yep.
Who knew? He was right.
And they're all dead. These people that are sitting in there, they got, spilled wine, and they just are not looking like they're having the best time in the entire world. And one of the interesting or weird things is Bruce winds up taking off one of the masks of the people, and it's like a clone of Alfred. You're like, whoa, did I read that right?
It kind of looks like Alfred, but I don't think it's. I think he just took. It might have been Powers.
Yeah, but it looks so similar to Alfred, and you're just like, okay, that's kind of creepy.
Very much.
What we do from there is we go and we see that Bruce is basically contemplating, what's going on, and he's been sitting here, and Alfred's like, don't forget your meeting with the firm's bidding on Elevated Park in less than an hour, and Bruce is just like, I told you, I'm waiting on the gray Alfred, waiting to see what happens. This can't be the end. I thought it was the end earlier. It's not. Something else has got to be going on. He's just like, it doesn't make sense. Members of the court's taking their own lives like that. And Alfred's trying to reason with him. And he's like, you saw the autopsies, Master Bruce. The court members are quite dead. And he goes, but something doesn't fit about it, Alfred. There's something behind it. I can feel it. Someone close all along. And you're sitting here thinking, as you're reading this, you're like, yeah, like, this doesn't seem right. And obviously when you have to trade, you're like, there's still so much story left. What's going on here?
But you're right. It just seemed way too clean. It's like someone did something. Someone went after them. It just seemed too neat and tidy for the court just to be taken out like that.
One of the things that Alfred says to him is he goes, that may be, sir, but the answers will come. You know the identities of at least several of the Court of Owl's major figureheads, and while their organization, as you've discovered, is clearly much larger than this one grouping, I'm certain you'll eventually bring them all to justice. If I may speak freely, sir, perhaps the thing that doesn't fit about this ending is that it is an ending. And I was like, that's a great point, actually, because Batman does have a tendency to think that certain things, that they're just continuous. It's just this continuous reign, and we wind up seeing that takes place all the way through Batman. Scott Snyder's run in Batman is at the end of it. What we come to find out is that, like, spoilers, that basically Batman has created this device to where he could always upload his consciousness into another Bruce Wayne, and to pick right back up where Batman left off. And you're just like, that's because he feels like it's going to be a never-ending thing that needs to happen. And so you're just like, oh crap, they carried that all the way through. Okay, that's nuts. And Bruce is just like, well, yeah, Alfred, what gives you that idea? And Alfred's just like, well, when it comes to them, to their murder, you are the answer to that mystery, Bruce Wayne, and that answer is enough. And he goes, now put on that bloody suit and get out there. And then Bruce is just like, all right, I'm going. And he goes, just call the Roberts and tell them. And he's like, what do you want me to tell them? And he's just like, that I won't be able to make it. And he goes, I'm going after him, Alfred. He's like, after who? And he goes, the one behind it, the one that I forgot. And he goes, him, the answer to all of this. And you see he goes into this morgue, and he pulls out this drawer, and there's a note in this drawer where there should be a John Doe, and it goes, follow me down the rabbit hole, and he goes, right behind you, old friend. And then you see that he winds up going to this crazy, decrepit building, and you're like, okay, where is this all going? And it turns out that this winds up being. He goes, sinkholes are tricky things. Gotham has a sinkhole, just one. It's the only one in Kane County, in fact, and it sits beneath this place, the Willowwood Home for Children. Years ago, it was Gotham's satellite hospital for children suffering from mental illness and neurological disorders, and it operated until 18 years ago when the sinkhole swallowed the orderlies' quarters. And in the days that followed the catastrophe, the truth about Willowwood became clear. The abuses that the children had been subjected to, the neglect, children alone, naked, rotting in their filth, left to starve. Now it sits abandoned, and the children dare each other to spend the night here inside. And he's talking about it, and he walks in, and he goes, I'm here. And he gets surprised, and he gets all rassled up in like a ocean net, basically, like a fishing net. And you want to take it from here and tell us what exactly is going on and what's going down? I don't want to give away everything. I want you to have some say in this too, my good man.
Oh, you're good. It seems to be that it is Lincoln March that is there doing it, but it's not Lincoln because he basically says, well, good. So if I'm not Lincoln, then who am I? And Bruce keeps on going into, your names, you poisoned the court. Those names were not all the targets, and he keeps on pressing Bruce. Who am I? If I'm not Lincoln, who am I? He keeps pressing him and pressing him and pressing him, and he finally says that I'm the big revelation is I'm your brother. I'm Thomas Wayne Jr., your brother that never was from the other side of the mirror, and he yells out, I don't have a brother. From a history that will be revealed shortly, the brother had died as a result of an accident. And we can look at that a little bit later. But it's this revelation that it's Lincoln March wasn't Lincoln March. It's supposedly Thomas Wayne Jr. And he just goes after him to this kind of modified Talon suit to be called a new version of an Owlman.
It's epic, dude. That splash is crazy. The owl to bat. Oh.
Everything just came together at that point. And so I found something interesting when Snyder was talking to a comic book resource, is asking the Owlman character is thinking, usually we think of Owlman, we think of the Earth 3 or his tied with Justice League. And he said, Snyder was saying, at the end of the day, I constructed the story for myself that I wanted Gotham to reveal itself to Bruce, saying, you've become too complacent. You think that you can take on the rogues in issue 1 and narrate it talking up a newspaper column. Then you get to issue 2 and you jump on a motorcycle over a helicopter and you still come home for dinner in 5 minutes. If you think you know me that well, I'm going to show you how little you know me. So the owls aren't the force behind it all. And looking at the end of the story became the court revealing this idea to Bruce in a way that didn't know Gotham at all, and almost like the reverse ripple effect. So first he realizes the court is real in his history. Then he realizes they're after him. Then he realizes there's a maze beneath his feet. And then he realizes there's a connection to the Bat family with Dick. And now there's a final revelation, someone claiming to be part of his family themselves. We wanted Gotham to say there are mysteries about my past you don't know, and every time you try to deny them, they get closer and closer until they're right behind you and right beneath your feet, and it's your own blood.
Insane, man. So crazy. You're just like, what? No, this is everything that I didn't know about Batman. How did I not know this? How did I not think of this? What's going on? And dude, the way that they fight, it is brothers fighting, man. It is dirty.
Oh, yeah. That whole next issue is just the fight that we didn't know was coming, and now we're glad we got to see it.
There's a lot of dialogue here, too. I feel kind of bad for Greg Capullo. He's got to write around all these bubbles. It's just like, draw around all these bubbles, and it's like, oh, man, it's absolutely insane. But it's he's right in that Bruce wanted to deny everything, and in doing that, it was a costly mistake.
And it's really interesting going further. He talks about what the owls are. Snyder goes on and says it started from scratch and was built up through the history of Gotham until it's part of the mythology. We've created for that. The owl is a symbol of death in a lot of folklore. It's a bird that leads you into the world of Hades. The notion of a character coming back from the dead with these regenerative abilities and a frightening look. Who can say I'm from the other side of the mirror, is what she tells Bruce. I represent everybody that came before you, and you'll never know I'm the ghost version of you. Oof. And so it just brings a whole new dynamic to this Owlman more than just evil Bruce.
Dude, it just brings a whole, that, like you said, just brings a whole nother layer, man. It's just, oh gosh, it's so well written too, so well drawn, and Yeah, I guess let's dig into that next issue. There's so much damage to one another that they just keep going and going. And basically, should we still call him Lincoln at this point? Lincoln is
I don't know what to call him at this point because I'm like with Bruce at the end of this. It's just like I don't know.
We'll see where that all leads us, but it's one of those things where like you don't. And so, this battle with Lincoln slash Thomas, slash, we'll just call him Owlman. It's just nuts. It's Owlman just basically as Bruce is like hitting him and, getting his licks in.
Throwing into buildings,
Oh, dude,
throwing into
it's
planes.
absolutely bananas. Because, they fight throughout the Willowwood hospital or whatever you want to call it. And then as Bruce gets thrown out of this, basically speared through a wall, he winds up shooting his grappling gun, which then pulls down Lincoln. I'm just going to call him Lincoln. Pulls him down, and he's just like, oh, not so fast. He's like, oh, okay, you want to go for a little ride, my friend? Let's go for a ride. And he then, before Bruce is able to let go, he winds up shooting his own grapple gun on Bruce and traps him. And he's just like, let's go for a ride here. And you're right, just slams him into buildings and then slams him into the planes and then into this Liberty Bell. And basically, the plane is the last thing that Batman lands on. His cape is gone at this point, and he is holding on by one of these propellers, and he's just like, Owlman basically says, all right, your brother's watching over you just as he always have. It's all right. You could die. You'd be good. He goes, you must have felt it sometimes, Bruce, that sensation of being watched. Well, those were my eyes you felt. My eyes watching you day and night, hating you for not seeing me, for not looking back, hating you with every fiber in my body. And all that time you spent watching over your little kingdom, nose to the streets, windows, all that time, I was getting better, stronger, with the owls, getting ready to become their king. And all that time, you should have been watching your own back. And Batman's just like, and you should take your own advice. And he's just like, huh, what's that supposed to... Oh, no. And we see that Bruce has put this explosive device on Lincoln. Bruce basically is just like, okay. Like, he climbs himself up onto the wing from the propeller, and then he winds up just letting go. And he's like, all right, the suit's dead. Nothing left. No power. I can't hold on any longer. And he just lets go, and he's falling towards the city, and he's like, nothing I can hold on to. Not anymore. And again, brings it all the way back to the Red Hood. She looks beautiful from up here. Dick, you always lied. You always liked taking the plane, seeing the city this way. I see why. I try to let it go. But even as I do, the city, she calls me back to her. She saves me. She reminds me that we still have work to do. And he just goes, switch to high velocity bat rope right now, which is awesome. He then winds up wrapping himself around this steel beam and like flinging himself into the Wayne Tower building that is newly under construction. And as he does so, you see this arm come out of nowhere and just goes, you just won't stay dead, will you, brother? And you're like, oh my gosh, he's back. How did this happen? And you could see his suit is definitely a little bit more worn down. And I like that you could see both of them getting more and more worn down as this entire thing happens. And he goes, well, I'll make sure that you're dead this time. This building, this tower that's supposed to be the centerpiece of your new initiative, he's like, basically, I'm going to destroy it, and I'm going to blow you up with it. So have fun with that. And says to Bruce, he goes, I was healed, and the Owl's plan was to present me to the city as myself, as Thomas Wayne Jr., because he goes, Bruce, he's like, you dropped off the face of the earth. You went to train, you were doing whatever you were in the Himalayas or whatever. And he goes, so the Owl's plan was to bring me up as Thomas Wayne Jr. I was going to bring the House of Wayne to its greatest heights with their help. But then you returned out of nowhere, and the court thought that the spotlight on the Wayne family was too bright, so they came up with Lincoln March, the man that I could become to reclaim the city from them in a different way. And he goes, you'll be the beak of the great owl, they said. And he goes, but that's not what I wanted, Bruce. I wanted this city in earnest. It was my time. And he's like, and now I can never have it. I know that. But if I can't be this city's future, I'll be its secret past. And he's basically like, and I'll kill you. And you're like, okay. And so he goes, die knowing this, brother, will you? You're nothing but a footnote, a blip, destined to be forgotten. Me, I am Gotham's history. And Batman's just kind of like, finally. And as these explosions are going off, you see Batman dig his thumbs right into Lincoln's eyes. And not good, man. Not good. And he goes, Batman just, after he does that, he sort of runs to get away from this explosion that's happening from these plastiques that Lincoln had placed all throughout the building. And Batman runs and he jumps, and Lincoln's just yelling at him, "Run, Bruce, run from the truth, run like you always have." And of course, monologuing, and Batman jumps out of the window and is able to, or actually jumps down the elevator shaft, is able to slide his way down and escape before it all comes crashing down. You have this building, this Wayne Tower building, just crumbles to the ground. And then after that, you get Bruce back in the back at Wayne Manor with Dick, and he's talking to him about basically everything that happened, and is just like, "Hey, Bruce, what's going on?" And because they do tell you that there were no bodies found at the wreckage, and everything's kind of up in the air. And Bruce was talking about what just their resources that the Court of Owls has,
and says that he's not sure to believe, and he says he almost doesn't want to believe and doesn't want to give it a second thought of
right.
It was Lincoln really his brother.
After that, he basically just says, even with all this stuff, it basically tries to make amends with Dick after punching him in the face. And he's just like, Dick's like, "Yeah, I guess, since you're recovering, I guess I won't hit you. I was going to, but I won't." And they share a nice little conversation. And Bruce does say, he goes, even with the initiative part of me was doing it to have more lookouts, more bases for Batman rather than seeing the city itself. But I see now that was wrong, because Gotham isn't Batman. Gotham isn't the Owls. Gotham is all of us. And I like how Dick goes, "Well, it's a little bit Batman. Come on." And he goes, "In the end, I have to say that I'm grateful to the Court of Owls for the lesson. But even so, if they reemerge, when they reemerge, I will always be watching." So he kind of, turns the tide on the court. It's crazy, and you think it's over from there, man. And why don't you take us into the next chapter from there, because it just gets crazy.
Oh yeah, no, it is. And I before moving on to that, I like what he tells Dick, that the truth is that he didn't save him from his dark fate. He saved Bruce from one, and keeps on doing that every day. So you see that continually strong connection, that even if Dick and he disagree and fight, that Bruce considers him the one who constantly brings him back from the darkness. So, but yeah, this backup story is what we were kind of alluding to. If you do pick up the trade of Night of Owls, be very, very, very careful about reading this tale about Jarvis Pennyworth. You get this backup story that kind of brings to light the connection of how deep the court was going. And so, because they had that whole story in that trade collection of Night of Owls, when you don't even get the revelation of Lincoln Marsh.
Definitely.
So just be careful about that. And so you kind of, Jarvis is, at that point, he was the butler for the Waynes, and he's writing this letter to Alfred and kind of warning him that, I wanted this for you, but the Wayne house is cursed. He's trying to escape. You see he's trying to escape someone, and it looks to be a Talon that he's escaping from. And kind of flashing back to, it looks like Martha Wayne is having some issues with wanting to have the city care for the kids and want Bruce to grow up in a good city. But, someone is, or something is, controlling the mayor, right, and controlling the funding that's going on.
She basically becomes a nuisance to them.
Yes. And possibly is marked for, to put it lightly, marked for termination. And so you see at one point that Jarvis receives a call from probably someone representing the court, just saying, next time you take care of Miss Wayne to the city, you will take her to the dock for a conversation between friends. And you fail to comply, I promise you it won't be pleasant for you or your masters, past, present, and future. And Jarvis is like, well, who is this? And then an owl crashes through the window, killing itself. And
right,
which is kind of creepy and cool, but kind of adds to the allure about it. And Jarvis tells, Martha that he did receive a threat. And Martha's like, I'm not going to be threatened. I'm going to do what I want to do. Gets Bruce in the car with her, and there's an accident that occurs, and Jarvis is able to save Bruce, and the consequences of it, Martha supposedly loses what is Thomas Wayne, Bruce's brother, in the accident. Jarvis goes into the idea that the Waynes take off to kind of get away from Gotham for a while, do some healing, and then the court targets Jarvis and basically kills him. It's a nice epilogue to this story because you see it flashes forward Bruce and Alfred, standing over the graves, and even Alfred says, "I don't know what to believe. I don't know. Was my father killed by the court? Did he have some influence on this?" It's the same thing that Bruce has. Is Lincoln his brother, his long lost brother? There's just not enough evidence to say for certain, and that makes it a good mystery. And like with everything, I didn't see a body.
Good point.
So it's a very tragic idea, but adds more to this mystery and the history of the Waynes.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it just, I think that was very eloquently said. I don't know that I have much to add on to that other than just, man, so tragic because he's writing this letter to Alfred and he never gets to send it, man. It's again plays off that tragedy aspect of things where he's just like, look, and then it makes you think like, because he talks about, I want to see you in a play. I want to see you act. I want to see you do all this stuff. And, I don't want you to have to take on this burden. I want you to live your own life. And come to find out that like, I guess Alfred was destined to be with Bruce because like Bruce wouldn't be who he was without Alfred. So I think that's the biggest thing. Not that people forget about with Batman, but it's just Batman would not be Batman without Alfred, in my opinion. And that's just, it connects them along,
I agree.
And it connects them further back and even more, they're more intertwined than they ever were, not originally intended, but that they ever thought, I guess that would be the best way to put it. And it's amazing. It's a great way to tie it in. And it was definitely something that shocked me. I was like, oh, there's more. No way. This is crazy. I was like, oh gosh, no, they did. Oh God. Okay. Yep. Well, and then the fact that you're like, all right, just dig them up. And because Bruce is like, yeah, we can dig them up and find out. And Alfred's just kind of like, you know what? I don't know that I want to know. And because I'd rather just put it all behind us at this point. And you're like, and that's Alfred for you. It just takes the less selfish route throughout the entire thing and just such a good guy. So yeah, man, I freaking love that aspect of it. And then we got one little backstory where you get Harper and we're introduced to Harper Row and her brother. I don't know that this is really all that pertinent to all that's going on with the Owls. So we could talk about it if you want, or
it's from what I remember reading it recently, it's a nice introduction to Harper. I think it was just part of the the arc that they wanted to collect it at that point. I don't think it even fits into the next storyline, which was Death of the Family. So I think but it is a nice introduction to Harper, and we kind of go into Harper. For those of you, this episode will be coming after what we go into with Lisa from when we did cover a big extent to Batman and Robin Eternals. So we delve into Harper Row with that, but it is a nice introduction to the Harper Row character.
It's basically you find she sort of forced her way into Batman's world, and it's really cool. And the way that it goes about it is interesting. It's tragic in a way as to what happens with her brother, and her brother's bullied for being a gay man, and it's not okay. And it's one of those things where Harper is basically in charge of her brother, and it's just like, you know what, like you can't let everybody sort of get you down, and we're gonna go and we're gonna sort of get out and do all these, great things. And then Harper winds up getting invited to this Wayne sort of party, and her brother pushes her, to go. And so that way he can sort of have some time to himself. And she does go, but when she comes back, he's not in the greatest shape. He obviously has been bullied some more. And so Harper then tries to confront these bullies, who then go to take the extra mile to make sure that she hurts as well as her brother. And that's when Batman intervenes. And then there's this obsession about Batman that she gets. And she's a very, very, very skilled technician, would probably be the best way to describe her, right? Yeah, very skilled technician with, the power grid of Gotham. And she winds up finding one of Batman's, relay signals. And tries to help him to an extent when he's on a chase with somebody, and turns out that she actually does the opposite of what he was supposed to do, and he basically is just like, nice work, but get the hell out of my way and don't bother me. And she's just kind of like, okay, well, you're welcome. And then after he leaves, she's just kind of like, yes, like I'm now entrenched. Like, hey, at least he knows who I am. And it's just, like you said, a great introduction. But man, oh, that's a doozy, isn't it?
Hey everyone. Before we go to the next topic, we are going to head into some ads that help the Geek Ultimate Alliance keep the lights on. We don't get to choose what ads come on, and they sometimes can be a bit loud. So I want to give you a 3 count in order to give you the opportunity to turn your volume down before they come on. 3, 2, 1. We'll be back in a little bit.
Yeah, it's we completed that. It is one heck of a saga, especially for an opening of a reintroduction with the New 52.
Succeeded,
they
too.
came out swinging. So, kind of hit a home run, grand slam, whatever you want to call it. So kind of as we bring the episode to a close, asking the question, did this arc kind of have an impact beyond its initial release?
Definitely. With it's one of those things the court have since appeared. I know we talked a little bit about how they've been relatively absent, but they are now deeply entrenched. And I think it's one of those things where it's played a part into even people's, runs like Tomasi on Detective and all that jazz. And it's now firmly entrenched into the Batman lore. So yeah, I think that this definitely cements itself as a definitive Batman story. If anything, this whole saga always appears on any to-read Batman lists where it says Batman stories to read. This one always shows up now. This and, the whole Court of Owls saga. So I would say, to anybody, man, if you say you're a Batman nut and you haven't read Court of Owls, get on it. It is insane. And read the whole thing. Read the whole saga. Read all the tie-ins. It's phenomenal.
And I kind of like how kind of Snyder, this was a reflection piece on the whole saga itself that he was saying to I think the online blog Observer. Says he said, I think for me a lot of the run is about Bruce's mortality. He's a character that is constantly at war with his own immortality. To me, that's deeply interesting. He's the character that makes himself through force of will into legend and something that extends beyond his body and extends beyond his own limitations. At the end of the day, what makes him human is what makes him relatable. I like showing how wrong he can be and how weak he can be, because ultimately when he gets out from under those failures, he will say, I might never know this city, but I'm damn sure gonna try to get to know it. That's Batman to me. Batman tells you the odds might be completely unbeatable, but what you're facing might be terrifying and intimidating and impossible to defeat. But that doesn't mean you're not going to get up and believe that you can. And that's what I believe his whole thing, what he was able to accomplish with, he brought more depth to both Bruce and Batman.
It's so freaking great, man. It just is. But I mean, think about the amount of times that he has Bruce almost at the end of his rope, and he just keeps crawling back and keeps crawling back. And it's one of those things that we find that it's throughout Snyder's entire run of Batman. And it's something that he still continues to play with even today as he's writing Batman. And this came out in 2011, right? I mean, think about that. It's just like, wow, the fact that he's been able to tie that into everything is phenomenal. So,
kind of thinking of the whole saga, what impact did the saga have for you personally? What makes this one of your favorites?
When I bought the first Court of Owls, I went and then I bought the City of Owls after that. And after that, I went and bought Death of the Family and then 0 Year and so on and so forth. And it was really my first way of starting to collect. Because when I was younger, I just had a bunch of different comics from yard sales and all that stuff. So you never know if they were just collections or anything like that. So it was one of those things where it helped get me back into the first book, helped get me back into it, just comics in general. And then second, this just started to help me collect and started introducing me to, okay, I'm not just paying attention to the story either. Now I'm paying attention to the writer and I'm paying attention to the artist. And I want to collect more of these people's works because I'm now a big fan and so on and so forth. So it had a massive impact on me, man. I would say definitely made me start to collect more and care more about the creative team. How about you?
This was one before Rebirth came about. This was the only kind of this was the only one I was collecting at that point, Batman. So it blew me away, and that was my first introduction to Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. So it it was just amazing about what they could do, and that you can continually add more depth to these characters, and find yourself saying, "Man, this is one of the reasons why Batman is my favorite." So, a new question bringing up at this point is, could you see this kind of arc as a movie or TV show? Now, I know they brought, and I didn't watch the final couple of seasons of Gotham. I'm still trying to play catch up. I know they brought him on Gotham, but just thinking about the saga itself, could you see this as a movie or TV show?
Definitely. And I think if they wanted to play loosely with the storyline, dude, I don't know. I think that they might go that way with Reeves's Batman. They might.
That would be interesting.
It is definitely interesting. Like, if what we're hearing about it so far being a noir-driven Batman story and murder mystery and all that stuff, this definitely could play some sort of factor into that. And I think building it up over the amount of movies that they want to do, which I believe is right now initially just a trilogy, and I'm sure Matt Reeves is going to get to the end of that trilogy and be like, I need to make something else at this point. However, don't want to obviously go too far down the road, but I could definitely see it working in a film fashion. And I think there's enough of everything in there. There's enough of the investigative skills. There's enough of the action. There's enough of the villains and trying to figure out who's in charge of what, and the Bat family and everything else. And I think that could work so well as a movie. And if they didn't want to do it as a live action movie, what are we waiting for with the animated movie? I mean, they sort of touched on it a little bit with Batman versus Robin, but it was also kind of Damian's introduction, I believe, into the animated series, into the animated universe, the DCAU. And so, hey, let's get on it if that's the case. So, if you no plans for the big screen, then let's do it for the animation. That is, I'm all about it, man.
Yeah, I could definitely see it. You get a little more room with the animated at that point. But yeah, with Reeves, it would be a nice idea to introduce something not of the old standard of the Rogues Gallery, introducing it for everyone, not just the fans. I would love it at that point, but we'll have to see. Any final thoughts before we kind of bring the episode to a close?
No, really just the biggest things for me are, for those of you that haven't read it, go out and read it. And I would also highly suggest, if you have read it, but you have not continued on in the Snyder Capullo run of New 52 of Batman, go for it. You will not be disappointed. That is for sure. There is a lot of great material, and I would highly suggest this to any comic fan, not just a Batman fan, but anybody looking to get into comics. This would definitely be one of the stories that I would point out. And then last but not least, want to thank you again for having me on, my man. It has been a pleasure discussing all this with you. And I know you told me before we recorded that if I babbled on, it was a good thing, but I apologize if I talked your ear off this time around. I know it's a longer episode, but thank you.
It's a great discussion. I appreciate you coming back on and kind of bringing this arc to a conclusion, since it was, like you said, one your favorite storyline at that point, and would love to have you on again, seeing what other stories you kind of put in your top list at that point. So no, thank you, and I know we'll be hearing from you again. So as always, so talk about how people can follow you and go to your show.
Sure. If you guys would like to follow me on social media, main place is definitely Twitter. You can follow me at Jordan Funky. And if you are listening, if you are interested in listening to me babble on a little bit more, you can listen to Chris and I, my other Chris Rimmer and I's podcast, DC Comics Squadcast, where we discuss new issues that come out weekly from DC. We used to just focus on the Justice League characters, but now it's kind of just more like what we're enjoying the most, and also sort of what's most relevant going on with everything. So we're adding some books, we're dropping some books here and there, but it's always a fun discussion. So come on by. We like to have a good time. And you could find that page at DC Squadcast on Twitter as well. So with that being said, thank you guys for listening. And Chris, again, thank you for having me on, man. It was a pleasure.
No, thank you. And, if for those of you listening at that point, thank you for listening today. You can follow the podcast on Twitter. We are at Finest Believers, and me personally at Chris Balga. You can email the show at worldsfinesttruebelievers@gmail.com. Feel free to continue to tweet, email. I've had a lot of people reach out already. First time ever speaking to them, listeners wanting to be a guest. So we're getting you all filtered into the schedule. Continue to reach out, giving feedback, questions. Love it. Continue to review the podcast on Apple, Google, whatever platform you're listening to. You can find us on all the platforms. If I'm not on a platform yet, let me know and we will share the feed. So again, thank you, Jordan. Thank you, listeners. We'll be hitting you back soon, and we look forward to another great conversation ahead. Thank you all. Bye-bye.